James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water has been out for a few weeks now, and after watching the film multiple times, both in Dolby and in IMAX, I think it's a visual masterpiece that effectively tells a more emotional story than the original, and does so through its groundbreaking visual style and cinematic immersion. While the plot treads familiar ground and the script misses in certain moments, I couldn't help but feel consistently immersed in the landscapes and central storyline of Cameron's new movie, which in my opinion is something that the filmmaker always manages to pull off. In this video, I'm going to be listing the reasons why I loved Avatar 2 and why its visual storytelling elevates everything on display. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding Avatar: The Way of Water, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into my video essay discussing why Avatar 2 is a visual masterpiece. Now for me, Avatar 2 is in no way, shape or form a perfect film. The writing of dialogue was shabby, the plot was similar in parts to the original movie, and there were elements of the film that could have been fleshed out a bit more rather than just be hinted at. The introduction of Jake and Neytiri's children, both biological and adopted, brought with it questions like with those surrounding Kiri's origin and who her father is. Then there were factions and elements introduced like the Bridgehead base that we only saw a few scenes at, the humans' reasoning for upping the ante in their return, and a new material that apparently stops human aging. These things, once touched on more, could dramatically elevate the longevity of this story and what ultimately the war between the Na'vi and the humans on Pandora eventually leads to. But the point of The Way of Water is that yes, while we want more answers to questions posed and more development surrounding these new characters, James Cameron has successfully immersed us in this world once again. And he's done so through a greater emotional storytelling structure. We care about the characters and the central conflicts within each of them because we spend the elongated runtime learning of their family-related and individual struggles. And this is shown through a believable, heightened and detailed capturing of every single performance. We feel Loak's issues of not being recognised and his perception of being an outsider just in the 30 minutes we get with him in the Metkaina Oceans and with their people. We feel that in a similar way with Kiri when it comes to her partial bullying and the inner struggles over her growing connection to Eywa, her powers, and knowing who she really is. We feel the conflict within Spider as he finally gets to spend time with a version of his dad, who he eventually does rescue from the water in the final eventful moments of the film. And then we feel the trauma with Jake and Neytiri as they struggle to keep their children safe, face the inner struggles between keeping them safe or running into battle to try and protect them, and then the pain afterwards when they lose a biological son. It's very emotional points of interest that Cameron knows how to focus on in a universal way, and then by combining that with cutting-edge digital technology that believably transports you into the images you watch on screen, he achieves this on a huge scale. It's cinematic immersion, and this is something that in my opinion only a few blockbuster films have been able to achieve this year. There was Matt Reeves' The Batman, which using its filmmaking in the LED volume puts us in a new version of Gotham and establishes a well-paced detective noir story within the grimiest of boundaries. Then there was Top Gun Maverick, which puts us right in the cockpits of the characters and makes us realistically feel the weight of a much more important mission with emotional stakes. And then there was Avatar: The Way of Water, which made us feel like Pandora was an authentic location, with every ounce of detail captured in the performances and in the locations around them too. Many blockbusters today use digital effects in what I describe as flat, with little depth or detail in the frames we witness. You can see that a performer has literally stood in front of a green screen because of the limited time the VFX artists get to compose the images in a believable way. This also doesn't help when you are working on, say, a cinematic universe where you must produce 4+ movies a year and countless TV shows too, all using a similar palette from a filmmaking perspective. It's hard to see a visual identity from project to project, even while some of them take place on different worlds with different stories and at times have different tones too. However, with Avatar: The Way of Water and its upcoming sequels, James Cameron spent 13 years not just making it look as good as the original, but surpassing that film and advancing the hyper-realistic digital graphics. Almost all of the scenes were shot digitally with performance capture that enabled the shots to look as close to reality as possible. He and his team went to such an extent that they would develop new cameras just to capture real performances underwater, something you couldn't do previously without making the facial expressions look heavily rendered or touched upon in post. On this film, the actors had to further learn to hold their breaths underwater for longer periods of time so that they could capture certain scenes well, and those same actors would have to fully read their scripts for Avatar 2, 3, 4 and 5 so that they would really understand the characters they were portraying and the arcs that they would eventually go on. Add on the work that Weta did with VFX, advancing the computer imagery and the 3D high frame rate technology that brings that added hypersense to the underwater experience, both for the audience and for the characters that enter this new part of Pandora, and the result is simply breathtaking. As a whole, the result is cinematic immersion in digital filmmaking at the highest level it can currently be. A film that, while lacking in other areas, is able to put you in the location on screen in a way that older blockbusters did so well in different ways too. The Way of Water may not be a stride forward that's as big as the first Avatar when it comes to VFX, but considering how high the bar was set there, the fact that we are even talking about the noticeable advancement with it in the sequel just shows what an accomplishment it was. What made The Way of Water an even more fascinating cinema experience was the focus on expanding the world of Pandora, showing that over the next few films, this world can be bigger and richer while holding an evolving storyline. Once Jake Sully and his family reach the shore of the Metacaina's reef people, the audience is immersed in a new corner of Pandora, with new aquatic animals brought to life in touching and familiar ways too. In particular, the Tolkiens and the most known of them, Payakan, are those that aren't just there to wow you in the sense that these creatures look massive on the big screen, but they are more intelligent and therefore used to build a much more emotional connection between the Na'vi and the underwater life. The scenes between Payakan and Loak slowly build out to put you firmly on the side of these whale-like creatures that have suffered at the hands of the humans. And knowing that this isn't the end for them when it comes to their importance with Amrita and human aging means that we have only seen the beginning of a well-mapped out world and storylines in the years to come. Not just that, but from an aesthetic side of things, Cameron and cinematographer Russell Carpenter grounds the water sequences by having realistic reflections, illuminations, and a stunning use of light and flare. There's a clear difference between the way water is captured in this film versus other recent blockbusters that use water, and it's all the better here because they actually filmed in water tanks with the performers. It helps to put the viewer in these environments with the characters and create a sense of believability on a level that Cameron and only a few other filmmakers can do consistently well in the science fiction genre. The visual effects were elevated underwater, on the ground, and in the air, showing that Pandora is the kind of world that from film to film can take us to even more new locations and make us believe that this is an organic real-world place. And at the same time, it can elevate our attraction through an emotional connection to the creatures there and the bonds between them and the Na'vi. Speaking of the emotional connection that Cameron puts firmly at the front of the Way of Water's story, I think this is what really elevated this sequel from just being another good to look at installment. And to me, it promises that down the line, when we do get the more interesting answers surrounding the questions we currently have, that it'll be tackled with care and a sense of authenticity. In particular, the third act of Avatar 2 is one of the most thrilling final acts I've seen in a movie this year. Top Gun Maverick gave me a similar feeling, bringing together its characters and final mission to produce something nail-bitingly tense and action-packed in a way blockbusters mainly used to be. Avatar: The Way of Water follows that, essentially giving us a huge yet meaningful 1 hour long action sequence, pitting the technological power of the RDA against the unbreakable spirit of the Na'vi. While a lot of people are saying that this final battle is bigger than what we saw in the original film, I'd argue that it's actually smaller but appears bigger due to the epic sense of cranked emotional stakes that Cameron captures. In this fight, we've essentially got just a small batch of humans with Quaritch and his recombinant marines fighting the Na'vi rather than the combined weight of all of their human forces like we saw in the original. This time, it's a personal fight, one where the Na'vi are trying to defend their land and creatures, but one where Quaritch is on a path of revenge based on the memories he does have. There's not just a big fight and one side wins, there's emotional payoff with the eventual loss that the Sully family now has to overcome. The death of their son Netayam sends Ney'tiri into a powerful moment of her own revenge, brutally killing and screaming at humans on board the sinking ship, and almost killing their adopted son, the son of the human Quaritch that she didn't really have a good connection with. It's way more character driven in the sequel, and we get a greater sense of the characters' drives and how they feel when something that means everything to them is either taken from them or could be. James Cameron delivered an intense and emotional climax, one that is partially inspired by his own record-breaking film Titanic, and one that, like his previous work, connects to the audience through all the heartfelt thematics and character build-up in the first 2 acts of the story. In the first Avatar, there was the romanticism of 2 people of different species coming together and our human protagonist eventually becoming one of the people. In Titanic, there was the romanticism between a poor man and a rich woman, and that love lived on regardless of the disaster that came with it. There's essentially a romantic pull at the heart of each of his films, and whether that's to do with an actual love with someone or a love for something, Cameron universally knows how to attract an audience every single time. In Avatar: The Way of Water, the romanticism comes through a growing love for the oceans and a sense to protect the love that already is, with a family learning to fight and survive together. And it seems like that greater sense of romanticism has hit a chord with the audience once again. In fact, when all the doubters were ready to proclaim that Avatar 2 had flopped at the box office in its first weekend, the known pattern of Cameron's films exploding during their second weekend looks to be happening once again now that people have seen the film and spread the word around. So the filmmaker behind some of the biggest blockbusters in history clearly hasn't lost his way nor his connection with universal audiences. The many plot holes, the weird hints at science, and the occasional shabby use of dialogue seem unaffected by the universal appeal that his movies bring and the high level of visual and immersive filmmaking that he and his team aim to constantly produce. In the end, we got a movie that was everything Cameron wanted. A thrilling 3 hours of cinematic immersion on another world that, yes, has all the action spectacle you'd expect, but more importantly, all the emotional heart with a family learning to fight together in the darkest of times. But that was my video discussing why I believe that James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water is a visual masterpiece. From the visual production in digital filmmaking to the elevated sense of immersion and emotion in its storytelling, Avatar 2 is an attempt at creating pure cinema and not just a generic sequel. It's such a weird instance for me because normally when a sequel has an unbalanced script and takes beats from the original film, I would tend to not love it as as much as I do here. But as I said, Cameron has this spark about him when it comes to the filmmaking and the connective storytelling on show. He uses 3 hours to put you firmly in a world or with a group of characters and make you truly feel their journey. He connects you to the intimate themes of romanticism and togetherness in a way that other filmmakers can't do on this bigger scale. It's all about the wonder of the big screen experience, and I really respect that when it comes to making big screen spectacle like this. It's what made me fall in love with cinema decades ago, and like Top Gun Maverick from this year, The Way of Water captures what the cinematic experience is all about. But let me know down below in the comment section what you thought of Avatar: The Way of Water, alongside whether you agree with the points I raised about cinematic immersion and the visual beauty of James Cameron's epic sequel. For more videos surrounding Avatar 2 and its future sequels, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.